Here's Flanders' Friend, Chapter 77, A Puff of Smoke. The councilman marched towards the tent determinedly. It's time to bring things to a close, he said to his assistant. He was sweating like a pig in a deck chair. And he'd had enough. Arthur, he said to the outline of his green tent, as he couldn't exactly knock on the door. There was no response. He shifted his feet. Arthur, it's time to come out now, he said calmly, trying to keep his annoyance in check. There was no response, only silence, and the whistling of the birds and the sweep of the cornfields. I'm going in, he said to his assistant, and he bent his 6'2" frame into the small space. He didn't look happy at all. I hope they're not going to have fisticuffs, said Tim, as he remembered their boxing lessons. He knew that Arthur would win. Then the flap of the tent flung open. He's not there, he shouted, with a face as red as beetroot. He's gone. Everyone was amazed. Gone, said Tim and Emma in unison. They had no idea where he could have gone. Is there a back entrance, a hidden zip? The official said, confused. A back entrance, said Tim, and Emma fell about laughing. Even the council assistant began to giggle. This was further amplified when a boss put his shiny shoes in a big pile of manure. Again, help me, he called out to everyone, but no one was listening. They were too busy enjoying themselves. Tim decided to look inside the tent. Maybe Arthur has a secret escape route, he said to himself. Tim knew how much Arthur liked secrets. It was unlucky, but he lifted up the sleeping bag and wafted it about. But the only thing that fell out was Arthur's Luger. Arthur was gone, as if into thin air. There was no escape hatch, no means of escape. And then a thought slowly entered Tim's mind. It was an outrageous and bearably believable notion. He thought of the Luger and he thought of Arthur's war stories. Maybe they weren't just stories after all. Maybe he had been in Flanders fields long ago, he thought. He continued rummaging, but for what he didn't know. Then he found an old crumpled envelope. It was addressed to a lady whom he'd never heard of. It was hard to understand the faded, elaborate, elegant handwriting. Tim ploughed on, taking in each word. He caught his breath when he read the phrase, missing in action, presumed dead, and he felt a little faint and a million thoughts whirled around his head. Outside he could hear people arguing. They had no idea, he thought, and he smiled to himself. Arthur had come up top trumps again, he thought. He'd come back to help Tim, and now that his job had been done, he stepped out of this world and back into the next like a magician with ease. Tim stuffed the letter and the Luger into his pocket, and he closed up the tent to the puzzled onlookers. How are they? Said the stressed man from the council. Tim shrugged. There was still that he could say. This won't be the last you hear from me, he shouted, before driving away at high speed. Tim smiled and knew he'd never hear from him again. Tim put his arm around Emma. He wanted to tell her everything, but now wasn't the right time. He felt the Luger in his pocket, and he smiled as he walked out of the woods and back to his old mundane life. But his thoughts returned to Arthur and all of the fun that they'd had, and all he had learned. What great fun, he said, and he smiled a big, happy, contented smile. The end.